The Viking Age, an era drenched in blood, legend, and fire. Popular culture paints it with broad strokes of adventure and freedom. We imagine fearless men with axes, roaring across oceans, and powerful women, shield maidens, fighting at their side. But peel away the myths, and a darker truth emerges, one that reveals not glory, but suffering. For Viking women, life was not golden mead halls or heroic battles. It was a world of fear, humiliation, and survival. Behind the sagas of gods and warriors lies another story, one written in silence, in scars, and in the forgotten graves of women whose names were never sung. This is their story. Marriage defined a Viking woman's life. To modern eyes, Viking women seem unusually free. They could divorce, inherit property, and even demand the return of their dowries. But this supposed freedom hides a brutal truth. Marriages were business contracts, not romances. Fathers and brothers traded daughters like silver. Her hand could be exchanged for land, livestock, or alliances. And if she resisted, her voice carried no weight. The saga of Hallgerd Longlegs tells of a girl who was married off 3 times, each union decided without her consent. Her life was a tool, her body a treaty. Wedding ceremonies themselves reflected this imbalance. A bride stood, weeping, while men drank and celebrated. Her tears were not shameful, they were expected, proof of her obedience. She entered her husband's household not as an equal, but as property. Virginity was treated as proof of value. Husbands could demand evidence that their brides were untouched. If found wanting, the marriage could be annulled, and the woman shamed for life. Some sagas describe public inspections. Imagine the humiliation, your most private self turned into courtroom evidence. The marital bed was not a place of tenderness. It was obligation. Husbands sought heirs, and women who failed to produce sons lived under constant suspicion. A barren wife was pitied at best, cursed at worst. Some were accused of witchcraft, blamed for family misfortunes. A husband had the right to discipline his wife physically. Beatings were legal, provided they did not kill her. The law offered no protection. A woman's bruises were not seen as crimes, but as corrections. And yet, women endured. They managed households, supervised servants, and raised children under this constant shadow. Silence was survival. If a woman broke the code of loyalty, punishment was swift and brutal. A man could seek compensation for his wife's adultery, but often the sentence was death. Methods varied: flogging, stoning, drowning. Some were buried alive, entombed under soil while their community looked on. Others were forced into rivers, their hands bound. If they floated, they were guilty, proof of witchcraft. If they sank, they were innocent, but dead all the same. Honor mattered more than truth. Even suspicion was enough. A whisper in a hall could ruin a woman forever. Magic ran deep in Norse belief. Women who practiced Seid, the art of prophecy and fate-weaving, held influence. Kings sought them before battle. Farmers begged their blessings. But power carried risk. A sorceress could guide armies, yet the same skills made her a target. If misfortune struck, a poor harvest, a plague, a sudden storm, the seeress was blamed. Archaeological finds reveal graves where women's bodies were pinned beneath stones or pierced with iron stakes to trap their spirits. Some were burned, their ashes scattered to erase their presence. Others were mutilated before death, fingers severed so they could never weave fate again. To wield power, was to invite execution. Stories of shield maidens fill sagas, women like Lodritha, standing in shield walls, fighting like men. But historians know these tales are exceptions. Most women met war as victims. When Viking raiders struck foreign coasts, women were dragged screaming from homes, chained and forced aboard longships. Chronicles from England, Ireland, and the Frankish world describe entire villages emptied of their women. These captives became thralls, slaves. They worked fields, ground grain, spun cloth, and wove cloth. But their bodies were also exploited. Many were forced into sexual servitude, branded with irons, their children born into slavery. And Viking women were not immune. Defeated clans, the poor or debtors, could all be enslaved. The sagas rarely record their names. They appear only as shadows, property bought and sold like cattle. Yet some women resisted. The saga of Aud the Deep-Minded tells of a widow who fled across the North Atlantic after her family was slaughtered. She commanded her own ship, settled in Iceland, and became a respected leader. But Aud was rare. For most women, attempts at escape ended in brutal retribution. Runaway slaves were hunted, branded, or killed. Wives who fled abusive husbands risked exile, the loss of their children, and starvation. Freedom existed, but it was won at terrible cost. Beyond raids and marriages, daily life was relentless. Women arose before dawn to milk animals, prepare food, spin wool, weave cloth, and manage households. A mistake could be fatal, spoil the winter stores, and a family might starve. Archaeology shows women's skeletons with worn joints, bent spines, and arthritic hands, evidence of endless labor. Even wealthy women worked constantly, directing servants and overseeing estates, while men sailed abroad. And always the threat of violence lingered. Husbands could strike, courts could punish, communities could shame. A woman's world was never secure. The greatest trial for Viking women was childbirth. Without medicine, every pregnancy was a gamble. 1 in 3 women may have died young, often during labor. Labor was long, bloody, and agonizing. Women screamed through nights as midwives prayed and chanted. If complications arose, both mother and child could die. Archaeological graves confirm this. Women buried with infants beside them, lives cut short together. Yet childbirth carried a strange honor. Norse belief held that dying in labor was like dying in battle. A woman who gave her life in childbirth could join the same afterlife as warriors. It was the only path to Valhalla for women. Their battlefield was the birthing bed. The Viking legal system revolved around honor, but for women, justice was humiliation. A woman who insulted a man publicly could be dragged before the thing, the assembly. Her words were recited back to her, twisted as evidence. She might be fined, flogged, or stripped of her property. Worse were trials for witchcraft or adultery. Ordeals were common, forcing women to clutch hot iron or survive drowning tests. The outcome was never freedom. Guilt or innocence, both ended in pain. The harshest punishment was not execution, but exile. To be branded nithing, dishonorable, was to be erased. No one would feed you. No one would shelter you. Families turned their backs. Alone in the wilderness, women starved or froze, their bodies lost to snow or forest. Some ended their lives themselves, unable to endure the slow death of abandonment. In Viking society, honor was worth more than life itself. Few women lived long enough to see old age. Those who did faced neglect. Without sons, widows became burdens. Some were reduced to begging, others forced to serve in the households they once commanded. Their bones tell the story: malnutrition, broken hips, and rotting teeth. The sagas might praise old wise women, but archaeology reveals a harsher truth. Survival often meant misery. Death offered no guarantee of dignity. Some wealthy women were buried with jewelry, textiles, even ships, but many others were laid in shallow graves with little care. Worse still were ritual killings. In the Oseberg ship burial, one woman was strangled, her corpse placed beside another. Whether slave or rival,